Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into a really fantastic stack of sources. It's a detailed chronological history of techno, the culture, the sound, and maybe most importantly, the technology behind it.
Yeah, and our mission here is to look at it through this one core idea from our source material.
Which is?
That techno's story is all about the relationship between the city and the machine.
Yeah.
We're going to trace how specific places like Detroit or Berlin interacted with these huge shifts in technology to create, well, completely new sonic worlds.
Just decade by decade. And we're moving fast, which feels right for techno. We'll go from the analog 70s all the way to the AI-assisted 2020s. We'll hit the landmark records, but we're really going to focus on why the gear mattered. This is your shortcut to understanding a century of sound.
100%.
Okay, let's start in the 1970s. The sources call this the fetal movement, the gestation period.
Right, the groundwork.
Yeah.
And I see two key factors here.
Disco and hardware.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Culturally, disco gave us that relentless four-on-the-floor beat, that repetitive structure. But the real game changer was on the tech side.
The synthesizer.
The miniaturization of synthesizers. Suddenly, the equipment that used to fill, an entire university lab, these massive Moog or ARP modulars, they were becoming accessible. Musicians could have them in their homes.
And that accessibility is the spark, isn't it? It let artists really experiment with machine rhythm. They didn't need a human drummer anymore.
Not for that core pulse.
Mm-hmm.
And you could hear the future in the big tracks from that era.
Oh, yeah. You have to start with Kraftwerk, right? Trans-Europe Express in 77.
That was the sound of the machine talking. But maybe even more influential was Donna Summer's I Feel Love, also from 77.
Produced by Giorgio Moroder.
Yes. And it took that disco template, but it stripped out all the orchestras and just replaced them with these looping, relentless electronic sequences. It felt totally synthetic.
And completely modern. You also can't forget Yellow Magic Orchestra, Solid State Survivor from 79.
A huge one. They were pioneering how to integrate those synth sounds into, a pop structure.
So the gear making all this, it was still these big, bulky analog machines.
Oh, yeah. And the rhythm was coming from these precursors to the famous drum machines, like the Roland CR78 or the Maestro Rhythm King. They were primitive, but they gave you that rigid, automated beat. The machine was sort of waking up.
And that sets the stage perfectly for the 80s. This is where the story really ignites, the birth of Detroit techno.
And it spread to Europe.
And our sources really emphasize how Detroit's industrial character, that mix of factory power, but also, economic decline, how that shaped the sound.
But how did the technology let them actually make that sound?
That is the crucial question, because the vision needed a huge change in hardware. And that change was MIDI, the musical instrument digital interface.
MIDI. Okay, so for anyone who's heard that term but isn't quite sure, what is it doing?
Think of MIDI as a universal translator for electronic gear.
Before MIDI, getting a synth to play in time with a drum machine was a mess of complicated electrical syncing. MIDI let everything, keyboards, sequencers, drum machines, talk to each other digitally. It basically decentralized the studio.
So a bedroom producer could do it?
A bedroom producer could create these incredibly complex, synchronized tracks.
And the results were just immediate and foundational. We're talking about that holy trinity. Cybotron's Clear in 83, Model 500's No UFOs in 85. You can almost hear the concrete in that track. And of course, Rhythm is Rhythm's Strings of Life.
87. Those tracks basically wrote the rule book. And they were all defined by what the sources call the XEX bloodline.
The legendary Roland gear.
The legendary gear. You have the TR-808 with that deep, booming sub-bass kick, then the TR-909 with its sharp, almost digitized hi-hats.
And the punchy snare.
And then the weird one, the TV-303. It was supposed to be a bass guitar replacement.
But it failed completely at that.
And instead gave us that squelching, acidic sound that defined a whole subgenre.
So you combine that gear with early samplers, an Atari ST computer running something like Cubase. And suddenly, Detroit producers had the power of a major studio in their house.
Exactly. The machine had finally arrived, and it was affordable. The 80s were about the raw creation of sound with this very specific hardware.
Which created an entire universe. But then we hit the 1990s, and that universe just explodes. This is the global expansion, the second wave.
And the geography here is so important. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 changed everything for club culture.
Yeah, how so?
All of a sudden, you had these huge, vacant, forgotten industrial buildings in East Berlin. They were perfect for this raw metallic sound. Places like Trezor became these hubs. The machine found a new city to live in.
And at the same time, UK rave culture was growing up, moving into more refined clubs.
Right. And the sound had to adapt. It got more detailed, more complex to fill these massive new venues. You see this incredible diversification.
You get everything from the sort of political intensity of underground resistance
to Aphex Twin, just completely deconstructing it into ambient soundscapes.
And then you have Robert Hood basically inventing minimalism with Minimal Nation in 94.
And on the other end, Jeff Mills delivering the pure urgency of the bells in 97. The sounds wasn't just Detroit anymore. It was this global conversation.
So how did the machine, the technology, keep up with all this complexity? The sources call this the sampler era. What does that mean functionally? What changed?
The main focus shifted. It went from creating sound from scratch, like with an 808, to manipulating existing sounds.
Chopping up audio.
Exactly. High-end samplers like the Akai S3000 became the heart of the studio. Artists were taking tiny snippets, chopping up loops, rearranging breaks, building entire tracks out of these little digital fragments.
And to handle all those fragments, you needed a ton of space, which means huge mixing desks.
Huge mixers, like the Mackie 1604, and racks of outboard effects. The 90s sound was defined by this complex, multi-layered approach. It was Akai samplers, big mixers, and powerful new digital synths like the Access Virus. The machine allowed for just massive sonic breadth.
That massive breadth then leads us to the 2000s, where weirdly everything moves inward.
It shrinks back down.
Yeah, this is the era of minimal and microhouse, and the real dawn of in-the-box production. The physical studio starts to disappear.
This was a genuine revolution. The key technological shift was that your home computer finally became powerful enough to replace all those racks of hardware.
VSTs.
VST plugins, virtual studio technology, suddenly your keyboard, your effects rack. It could all be software, a line of code.
So the machine studio becomes a laptop studio?
Pretty much. And that fostered this whole new aesthetic defined by precision, detail, and obsessive editing. You see it coming from artists in Cologne, Berlin, and Chile.
I'm thinking of Ricardo Villalobos' Alcachofa from 2003. It's so detailed, so hyper-edited.
Or Richie Houghton's work on D9, closer to the edit. When your entire studio lives on a hard drive, you can perform these like surgical operations on sound. Everything got cleaner, often quieter, and obsessively minimal.
And the gear list just confirms it. It's all software. Ableton Live comes out in 2001 and just redefines the workflow.
It did. And VST developers, like Native Instruments, became the new gear manufacturers. So while the DJ booth was going digital with the Pioneer CDJ, the producers were staring at a screen. The city's pulse was now being processed through software algorithms.
Which, of course, led to a reaction.
Yeah.
That digital perfection of the 2000s leads to this massive backlash in the 2010s.
The huge backlash.
Our sources point to a return to raw, industrial sounds, peak-time techno, and crucially, a huge revival of physical analog hardware. Why? Why the backlash?
I think the machine had just become too perfect, too clean, maybe too predictable. Producers started craving the accidents, the physical feeling of analog circuits.
They wanted to turn knobs again.
They wanted to turn knobs. And culturally, the sound was getting very standardized around big clubs like Bergen. Artists wanted to break out of that.
And that desire fuels the Eurorack boom. Modular synthesis, all those messy patch cables from the 70s, suddenly it's affordable and it's everywhere.
The gear list tells the story. It's Eurorack modular systems next to modern hybrid gear like the Electron Octatrack or the Korg Volca series.
And the sound gets harder.
Much harder, more complex, more visceral. You hear it in Helena Hoff's raw, almost improvised sound on Discrete Desires.
Or the insane textures on Ski Mask's album Compro.
Yes. The big takeaway here is what the sources call the hybrid backlash. It's modular synthesis meeting DIA editing, modular X DAW. It brought physical control and the chance for happy accidents back into the process. It injected a bit of chaos back into the machine.
Which brings us right up to today. The 2020s, we're seeing this high-speed, hard groove resurgence. BPMs are way up.
Significantly up. And there's this new integration of AI into the workflow.
Right. So after the pandemic forced everyone into streaming, there's this big return to live venues. And the music reflects that with more aggression, more speed, and even bringing back some old trance ideas.
The sound is all about that energy. Powerful kicks, repetitive riffs, a return to hard techno sounds, but with that modern polish. And the machine is leveled up again. AI is now an assistant, a non-human collaborator.
So how does AI assistance actually show up here? Is it composing the tracks?
Not really composing, no. It's more like it's doing the heavy lifting, the editing, the mixing, the final polish.
Oh, okay.
AI mastering tools can optimize a track's loudness and frequencies instantly. Stem separation tools let you pull apart old tracks in ways that were just impossible before. It lowers the barrier to getting that professional polish, and it lets the artist focus just on the creative side.
And the gear is still hybrid, stuff like the Electron Digitact, the Roland TR-8S, but that human-machine partnership has really shifted.
Absolutely. The summary for this decade is real-time performance plus AI assistance. The machine is now this hyper-efficient editor, speeding up the whole production cycle. It just shows the relationship between us and the algorithm is still evolving at high speed.
That is an incredible journey, 5 decades of sound, all driven by this interplay between technology and the city. If we zoom out from all the specific gear, what's the one thing about techno that survived all of these changes?
The sources are very clear on this. Despite all the changing tools, the core elements are still repetition and acoustic design sound engineering. Everything else is just a variation on those two pillars.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've traced these 5 huge shifts. The XEMX creating the raw sound, the samplers allowing for manipulation, the PC driving that surgical editing, modulars bringing back physicality, and now AI providing this hyper-efficient polish.
The rhythm of the machine and the city, they just keep pushing each other forward.
That tension is the energy source. So, to leave you with a final thought, go and listen to 2 tracks that really show this evolution. First, put on Model 500's No UFOs from the 80s. It's raw, it's immediate, it is the XEOX sound. Then right after, play Dial 274 by Ski Mask. It's modern, it's dense, it's full of this complex digital and modular sound design. And ask yourself, if the core is still just repetition, how has all this new technology changed the quality of that repetition? What will the machine sound like next? We'll see you next time for another deep dive.